suspend the processing of visas for 75 countries. Those countries include Iran, Afghanistan, Russia, and Somalia. The suspension does not apply to non-immigrant visas such as tourist and student visas. It will also not apply to business visas or temporary tourist visas. Now,
the State Department is pausing indefinitely any processing of visas from 75 countries as part of a crackdown on immigrants the Trump administration says are using public benefits.
The U.S. government has suspended visa processing for Somalians seeking to travel to the United States, part of a sweeping policy affecting over 75 countries worldwide.
So it's been known, that so then Donald Trump just made a whole list of approximately 75 countries that will be affected with those visa with that decision of revoking those visas. So we're going to break down the list of countries that will be affected with this measure. So the very first, we're going in alphabetical list order. So the 75 countries whose immigrants visa processing the U.S. federal government under President Donald Trump has suspended effective January 21, 2026. This applies to immigrant visas only, not tourists of temporary visas, and is part of broader immigration policy changes. There's something that really people need to understand, and the visas that have been revoked are visas, or the suspension of visas are immigrant visas, okay? So it's not the same a tourist visa compared to an immigrant visa. So an immigrant visa is that kind of visas that will allow you to work in the United States, and that with time, those same visas will allow you to eventually seek a permanent residence, okay? A tourist visa is one visa that is usually used for just visiting the place, visiting the U.S. for a set amount of time, or a determined amount of time, which is usually days to a month. And in some cases, some people have reported that in the past, they had at least 6 months that were given to them to stay in the country only visiting. So let's break down the whole list. So in the first list, we have some countries. We have Afghanistan, we have Albania, Algeria, Antigua and Barbuda. We have Armenia, Azerbaijan, the Bahamas, Bangladesh, Barbados, Belarus, Belize, beautiful place. We have Bhutan, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Brazil, Burma, Cambodia, Cameroon, Cape Verde, Colombia, Republic of the Congo, Cuba, Dominica, Egypt, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Fiji, Gambia, Georgia, Ghana, Grenada, Guatemala, Guinea, Haiti, Iran, Iraq, Ivory Coast or Cote d'Ivoire, Jamaica, Jordan, Kazakhstan, Kosovo, Kuwait, we have Kyrgyzstan, Laos, Lebanon, Liberia, Libya, North Macedonia, Moldova, Mongolia, Montenegro, Morocco, Nepal, Nicaragua, Nigeria, Pakistan, Russia, Rwanda, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Somalia, South Sudan, Syria, Tanzania, Thailand, Togo, Tunisia, Uganda, Uruguay, Uzbekistan, Yemen, and sometimes grouped under Congo or the Republic of the Congo. So, I'm sorry guys if I broke down this list super quick, but it's only for a video purposes, because otherwise I will take forever to break down the whole list. So I'm sorry if I did that too fast. So, the list comes from multiple news and reporting sources summarizing the full list made available by the U.S. officials. Some reports vary slightly in naming conventions. Mexico and most of Western Europe are not in this list, through several Latin American, African, and Asian nations are included. Okay, the big question, guys, is, okay, we have this whole list of 75 countries. And so the main question right here is, why was Mexico not included in this list? I'm going to explain this later in the video. But as of right now, I'm going to explain why these 75 countries, how would those countries be impacted when it comes to economical reasons, okay? So we're going to break down realistically why or how would they be affected with these suspensions. So the number one reason, or the number one thing that will be affected to them, is called remittances. That's the biggest impact. So why it matters. So we have that many of these countries rely heavily on money sent home by migrants already in the US, right? So how the ban affects this. So fewer new immigrants, fewer future remittance senders, and over time, this remittance growth slows or declines. So the countries most affected with high remittance dependent economies, we have Honduras, Haiti, Guatemala, El Salvador type economies that really depend on this, like sending money when their family sends money from the US. And we also have Nigeria, which is another country dependent, relying on money being sent from the US. Then we also have Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, Jamaica. You guys know I have friends that are from Jamaica, and they have told me how the situation in Jamaica is like really bad. So that's why they have a lot of people living in the US. They rely on the US family to send money to them. And then we also have Ghana. So in these countries that I've listed, they have remittance of between like 10 and 30% of the GDP, impacted on less household spending, more poverty pressure, and currency depreciation risk. The number two reason of how like these countries will be impacted would be the labor pressure at home. So what happens is that the people who plan to emigrate, they will stay home. The domestic job markets become more crowded, and the countries that will hit hardest by this will be the young, fast-growing populations. So we have some of the fast-growing populations. We have Nigeria, Pakistan, Egypt, Bangladesh, Guatemala, and Haiti. The impact is they will have lower wages, greatest risk of social unrest or informal labor growth, and higher unemployment or underemployment. Because you have to remember that these countries, and I would add to that list of countries, I would add Colombia, that I know that Colombia has been growing within the last years, but I do really feel that there's still fast growing countries that are not fully developed, and that at some point they will be impacted by those measures. On the number 3, we have the brain drain slows. So the positive side is that they will have skilled workers, and those skilled workers, they will just stay in their countries. So some countries retain talent longer. The negative side is that those governments often cannot absorb or pay these professionals, so that leads to frustration. So instead, those professionals, rather than immigrating to the United States, they will just rather immigrate to some other countries that for sure give them the opportunity to migrate on a legal way. I mean, we have Canada, we have countries like Spain, like Portugal, like some other countries in Europe, like Germany, in which really people are preferring to moving out to those countries instead of the US because they claim that they have better opportunities there, because it's easier to legally impregnate those countries, And then on the number 4 reason or way in which they will be impacted is their currency and financial stability. So for fragile economies, fewer future dollars entering the country is what they will experience. They will increase pressure on exchange rates, foreign reserves, and inflation. So the most vulnerable societies will be places like Haiti, like Lebanon, like Somalia. So these countries already struggle with dollar shortages, inflation, and political instability. And then the next impact will be the trade and investment. So there will be places like Colombia with little immediate macro damage. The hit is social and long term, and it can trigger a recession at some point. So over time, countries may redirect, their migration flows to countries like Canada, like Europe, and the Gulf states. So always the most harm are the people who are like the poorest and the fragile states. And then also, so now that we already know how they will be impacted economically, I also need to add that when it comes to the U.S. economy will be impacted too. Like even if some people say, oh, you know what, like the United States is so strong that they wouldn't be affected by those decisions from Trump. Let me tell you something, guys. The U.S. economy has already been impacted by those measures, and let me tell you how. So, very, very small example. In the Los Angeles area, you will find a lot of small stores in which, believe it or not, most of the illegal immigrants are the ones that really buy from those stores. So if those illegal immigrants get out of the U.S., those businesses will for sure suffer because they will have nobody else to sell those goods and products. Like I heard today that ICE is in I think it's the fashion district from LA. So that means a lot of those businesses will just file bankruptcy or just stay out of business because a lot of those small, like informal type stores, the highest traffic or population that really buys from those stores are illegal immigrants. I'm not lying. Like you can go any of these days to LA and find out that by yourself. Okay. So the number one thing of how the U.S. will be impacted by those immigrants going to other countries or just like not deciding to take the United States as a place of like living and working. Well, it's called labor shortage. Okay. So the immigrant visas mostly feed permanently workers into the economy. And the sectors that hit the hardest with this is the construction. Okay. The construction industry, agriculture and food processing, hospitality and hotels, elder care and home health, healthcare, warehousing, and logistics. So they will experience fewer workers. So the projects will get delayed, the crops will be left unharvested, higher labor costs, and then reduced output. Unless what they really plan to do is just when it comes to, let's say, the agriculture sector, instead of hiring people, they decide to replace all that with AI. That's another reason why they might be trying to take all these people out of the country, The number 2 way in which the U.S. will be impacted by the lack of those immigrants will be inflation. So when the labor supply shrinks, usually wages rise faster than productivity and the business pass costs to consumers. So you feel this in food prices, rent and house, construction, restaurant prices, home healthcare, and childcare. I'm going to give you one little example about this. If you go to Las Vegas or if you go to Disneyland, you will see that less people are spending money in those places. And believe it or not, the people that used to spend much more money in those places are usually immigrants or illegal immigrants. If you don't believe me, do your research. So we will experience slower economic growth because immigration is a major driver of the U.S. growth. So without new immigrants, we will see that the workforce grows slower, the consumer demand grows slower, the tax base expands slower. You can see this if you go, let's say, to LA. You will see that a lot of business have been shutting down because they don't experience the same traffic no more. And then when it comes to housing market, the housing market will be affected as well because they will have fewer constructions. I mean, who's going to buy those homes? Housing shortages, prices and rents will rise. And then we also had that the federal and state budgets take a hit too. So there's some of those immigrants, believe it or not, they do pay taxes too. I mean, anything that you buy at the store today, you will pay a tax for it, right? Let's start with something small. So the pay payroll taxes will be affected. The pay sale taxes. Fewer immigrants will create less tax revenue, faster aging population, and greater strain on entitlement programs. And then another thing will be that the innovation and entrepreneurship will decline because these new people that were brought to the United States at some point, some of them start their own business. So the startup creation will be affected. Innovation, tech, medicine, the geopolitical and strategic costs. U.S. loses soft power. So then other countries like Canada, Australia, and Europe would capture all that good talent from these countries instead of the U.S. And then who is benefited, like low skilled native workers may see slight wage increase and less job competition. That's what they say, So, the big question is, why was Mexico not included in this whole list? So according to the information that I found, Mexico is economically intertwined with the U.S. So Mexico is not just a migration source. It's a top U.S. economic partner. So the number one or the second U.S. partner. So trading partner and often alternating with Canada. So millions of U.S. jobs depend on Mexico-U.S. trade. Supply chains are deeply integrated, like cars, electronics, food. So if they suspend visas in Mexico, they will disrupt cross-border business, hurt the U.S. companies that rely on this, and then slow nearshoring from China, which is what the U.S. wants. So other countries on the list do not have this level of integration, Also, the second reason why they didn't include Mexico in this list is because they have legal immigration, which is not equal to border migration. So most Mexican immigration today is family-based, like they already have another family member, which is already in the United States. It's employment-based, like it's very easy for them to find a job here because it's right next to the U.S. and because they already have long-established networks. You can ask your Mexican neighbor about this. They all know somebody that is already in the United States. So Mexico is critical security partner. So the U.S. depends on Mexico for drug enforcement cooperation, cartel intelligence, among so many other topics that I won't talk about, like in this video. So a visa would strain cooperation and push Mexico to reduce enforcement and increase, not decrease, migration pressure. Also, some people say that the migration from Mexico has fundamentally changed. So Mexican migration to the U.S. is near zero or negative. And more Mexicans leave the U.S. instead of getting in the U.S. This is an information that I found that I really don't think it's true, because I do really feel like, at least here in California, 90% or if not like half of the people that you will meet, they have some sort of like Mexican blood. So this is not true. And then, so basically, they didn't include Mexico because Mexico for them is economically indispensable. It's a security partner, and it will just, they wouldn't get any benefit, by including Mexico on like this list. But I do really feel like if they really are like banning all these 75 countries from like visa immigration, they should have included Mexico, because they are basing their decision on saying that they would include those countries based on fighting narco traffic, drug trafficking. So I feel like Mexico, if we talk about drug trafficking, Mexico will definitely be on the top list of countries. So at some point, I really don't find this very fair, but that's just my personal opinion. There's nothing against Mexicans or their culture. In fact, I do really feel like they are great people. But yeah, that's just my opinion, guys. I do really feel like our economy has already been affected by those, by banning, the migration, and especially on sanctuary cities or blue states, you will find that the economy will experience many closures, because a lot of those companies are impacted by migration, specifically companies like hotels, like the whole tourist chain companies will be super affected. Say Disneyland, Las Vegas, like all touristic places will be for sure very affected. But let me know your thoughts, guys. Comment down below, subscribe, hit the like button, and let me know what you think about this situation. I think that things are gonna get worse. Like, in one side, Trump is trying to really do everything that he promised in campaign, and the other side is affecting a lot of the economic chain. So let's just stay positive. But you deserve to know everything that's going on in the world. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys on in the next video. Bye.